There are people out there who don't want to hurt you. They just want to watch. And sometimes you won't even know they were there until it's too late. These are 3 true stories of ordinary people being watched without ever realizing it.
I'm not sure where to even start with this, but I promise you everything I'm about to say is real. My name's Evan. I live in upstate New York, and this happened to me last winter when I was staying at my grandparents' old house in Vermont. They passed away a few years back, and the property was handed down to my mom, but she never really wanted to deal with it. It's this little A-frame cabin on the edge of the woods, about 30 minutes outside Montpellier. Beautiful in the summer, but rough in the winter, snowed in constantly, sketchy reception, and no neighbors for miles. But I needed a place to crash for a couple weeks after a breakup, and my mom said I could use it if I didn't mind clearing the driveway myself. So I packed up my stuff and headed out there the first week of January. I figured the quiet would do me some good. No distractions. Just me, my laptop, and a few cords of firewood. The first few days were nice, peaceful, the kind of silence you don't get in the city. I'd sleep in, make coffee, read by the fire, and take walks through the woods when the snow wasn't too deep. At night, I'd light candles, throw on a podcast, and just exist. That house has this kind of heavy warmth to it, you know? The walls creak, the floors pop, but it's the kind of noise you get used to. Or at least, I thought I had. On the 5th night, I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner. It was close to 11 p.m. I remember the time because I had just checked the weather on my phone and was surprised I even had a signal. I was rinsing off a pan when I heard something. It was faint at first. Just this soft tapping sound, almost like fingernails on glass. I paused, thinking it was the ice cracking outside or snow falling from the roof, but it didn't stop. Tap, 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 coming from the living room. Specifically, from the big sliding glass doors that face the backwoods. I turned off the faucet and listened. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't random. It had a pattern to it. I walked slowly into the living room and just stood there. I couldn't see anything through the glass. It was pitch black outside and the interior lights just made it reflect like a mirror. I stared at my own reflection for a second. Then the sound stopped. I told myself it was probably a branch swaying in the wind or a chunk of snow melting and sliding down the roof. Something boring, something normal, but I grabbed the fireplace poker anyway and sat on the couch with it across my lap for the rest of the night. I didn't hear anything else. And eventually I fell asleep right there with the fire still going. The next morning, I checked the outside of the glass doors. No branches, no signs of animal tracks. But right there, about chest height on the glass, were 3 tiny smudges, round, almost like fingerprints. But smaller. Way too small to be mine. I stared at them for a while, then wiped them off with my sleeve. I didn't want to think about it too much. 2 nights later, the tapping came back. Only this time, it wasn't just a few taps. It was longer, slower, like someone was dragging their fingernails lightly across the glass in circles. I was upstairs brushing my teeth when I heard it. The sound carried through the floorboards. My stomach dropped the second I recognized it. I turned off the bathroom light and crept to the top of the stairs. I couldn't see the doors from up there, but I could hear it clearly. Shh, 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 like someone idly drawing shapes with a fingertip on the glass. I didn't go downstairs. I just stood there frozen, holding my breath. The sound went on for maybe 20 more seconds, then stopped. Nothing. Dead silent. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed upstairs, lights off, just listening. At some point I convinced myself it was an animal or some trick of the wind. I had to, because the alternative meant someone was out there, watching the house, touching the glass. The next morning I went outside again. I looked for prints. anything, but the snow was undisturbed. Just smooth, powdery white, not a single mark. But the glass was clean too, no smudges, like whoever or whatever had been there knew I'd checked the last time. Or maybe they wiped them off themselves. I don't know. At this point, I was seriously debating heading home early, but I kept talking myself out of it. The roads weren't great, and I didn't want to look crazy calling my mom about phantom tapping. So I stayed. I started sleeping with a flashlight and my phone in bed next to me. I moved a chair in front of the sliding doors and closed the curtains at night. I tried to forget about it. But the worst night was the last one, the one that made me leave the cabin for good. It was a Friday. I spent most of the day trying to distract myself, reading, watching stuff on my laptop. At one point, I even convinced myself the tapping had all been in my head. Stress, isolation, cabin fever, whatever. I felt almost normal that night. I made pasta, had a drink, watched a movie with the curtains drawn. Then, around midnight, I went to bed. I turned off the lights, crawled under the blankets, and laid there listening to the wind outside. Just when I was starting to drift off, I heard it again, but not the tapping. Footsteps on the roof. Slow, deliberate thuds, like someone walking in boots. I sat up instantly, pulse in my throat. The roof above the bedroom is steep and slippery, especially with the snow. No animal would move that slowly, and besides, I heard the creak of weight, like someone trying to stay balanced. Then it stopped. I reached for my flashlight, clicked it on. And right then, something scraped across the upstairs window. It was so quiet, I almost convinced myself it was my imagination. But I turned the light toward the window anyway, heart racing. That's when I saw it. Pressed against the glass were two small hands, palms flat, like someone crouching just out of view. The hands weren't wearing gloves. They were pale, thin, and they didn't move. I couldn't see the face, just the fingers. Spread out wide, tensed. I didn't scream. I don't know why. I just sat there frozen, staring at those hands. After what felt like a full minute, they pulled back slowly, not fast, not startled, almost calmly, like the person didn't care that I had seen them. I heard a soft thump on the roof again, then nothing. The rest of the night was silent, but I didn't sleep. I sat with my back against the wall, flashlight gripped tight, waiting for morning. At sunrise, I packed everything and left. I didn't shower, didn't even change clothes. I just got in my car and drove. By the time I reached the main road, I realized I had left the firewood door open, and I didn't care. I told my mom what happened a few days later. She didn't believe me exactly, but agreed the house probably needed new locks. A few weeks after that, a neighbor, someone from 2 roads over, called her to say they'd seen someone walking along the tree line near the property. Small, wearing white. But when they got closer, whoever it was just turned and walked straight into the woods. No shoes, no footprints were ever found. I haven't been back to the cabin since, but every now and then I dream about those hands, about the way they pressed against the glass, not to scare me, but like they were checking if it would open. As terrifying as that was, this next one might be even worse, because sometimes the thing watching you doesn't knock, it just waits until you fall asleep. My name's Lacey, and this happened 2 years ago when I was 22. At the time, I had just moved into my first apartment alone. It was in this small town just outside Spokane, Washington. The place was nothing fancy, a converted garage technically. 1 bedroom, tiny kitchen, and a single window in the main living space. But it was cheap, private, and after a rough breakup, I wanted my own space. I was working part-time at a local bookstore, mostly evenings. So I usually got home around 9:30 or 10. The neighborhood was quiet, a lot of older residents and retired couples. Definitely not the kind of place where you expect anything dangerous.
And for the first few months, everything was normal. I'd get home, throw something in the microwave, and watch Netflix until I fell asleep. I had a little futon set up across from the TV, and that window I mentioned, it faced the street. There was a street lamp just outside, so the apartment never got fully dark. At the time, I actually liked that. It made me feel less alone, but now that window haunts me. The first time I noticed anything strange, it was barely even a thing. I had just turned off the TV for the night, probably close to midnight. I was walking around, tidying up before bed, when I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. Just a flicker. I turned toward the window, but all I saw were shadows. I figured it was a neighbor walking by. Nothing weird, but it stuck with me. The way it moved, fast but hesitant. You know that feeling when you almost catch someone looking at you? Like your instincts fire before your brain can explain why? That's what it felt like. Still, I brushed it off, but over the next week or so, it started happening more, always when I was unwinding for the night. The blinds on that window were those cheap plastic vertical ones, and they never fully closed. I remember thinking, I should really replace these, but I kept forgetting. Then one night, I got home a little earlier, maybe 8:45. I was walking up to my door, phone in one hand, drink in the other. And as I got close, I saw it. A footprint, right in front of the window. It had rained earlier that day, so the ground was still damp, and there was a very clear, very fresh boot print in the mud. I looked around. Nothing. No one. But my skin went cold. It was just one print. Not a path, like someone had stood there for a long time and then walked backward. I went inside and locked the door, double-checked every window. That night, I dragged my dresser in front of the window just in case. I barely slept. The next day at work, I told my coworker Sam about it. He offered to come by and help me install a camera or even swap the blinds. I laughed it off, told him I was probably just being paranoid, but deep down, I didn't feel like I was. The next few nights were quiet. Until that Saturday, I got home around 9, ate dinner, watched some dumb horror movie. I think it was The Descent, which I'd seen before. I was halfway through it when my phone buzzed. A weather alert, storm warning, high winds expected overnight. Sure enough, by midnight, the wind was howling. I decided to go to bed early. I turned off the lights, brushed my teeth, and crawled into bed. But I couldn't sleep. The wind kept rattling the window, and I kept imagining that boot print outside. Somewhere around 1:15, I gave up, got up, walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water. That's when I saw it. The blinds were swaying, just slightly, not from the wind, from the inside. I froze. The window was closed, locked, but one of the slats, near the bottom, was bent, like it had been pulled. I didn't move. Then, just beyond that slat, I saw an eye. I'm not exaggerating, an actual eye, inches from the glass. Staring in, I dropped the glass. It shattered, water everywhere. I backed up so fast I hit the kitchen counter, but when I looked again, the eye was gone. I rushed to the door and locked the deadbolt, even though it was already locked. Then I grabbed my phone and called 911. They got there in under 10 minutes. I was still crouched in the hallway when they arrived. 2 officers walked the property. One of them found fresh prints, again, just one set. This time there were 3, all right in front of the window, deep impressions in the mud like someone had been standing perfectly still for a long time. The officer asked me if I knew anyone who might be stalking me. I said no, told him about the eye, the blinds, the feeling I'd had for weeks. He didn't say much, just told me to stay somewhere else for a few nights. So I did. I stayed with Sam for the weekend, and I'll be honest, part of me felt embarrassed, like maybe I had imagined it.
The police hadn't found anyone, just footprints. Maybe I was overreacting, but then Sam said something I'll never forget. We were sitting on his couch, eating pizza, and he looked over and said, "Lacey, you ever wonder why there were only footprints in front of the window? Like, if someone walked up, wouldn't there be more leaving?" That hit me, because he was right. Every time it was just the prints standing there, never walking away. I went back to the apartment that Monday afternoon. I had taken the day off work. I planned to clean up, maybe start looking for a new place. When I got inside, the first thing I noticed was the smell, like sweat, and something stale, sour. I thought maybe something had gone bad in the fridge, but when I checked, everything was fine. I opened the closet near the front door and immediately gagged. It was worse in there. My skin started crawling. I pulled the chain light inside the closet and saw something that made my stomach drop. The air vent at the base of the closet wall was unscrewed, barely, but enough to notice. The screws were loose and angled like they'd been turned by hand. I dropped to my knees, heart pounding, and looked closer. There were scratches around the metal frame and a small, smudged handprint. I ran out of the apartment and didn't go back. Sam came with me later that night to grab my essentials. He stayed by the door while I packed, watching every corner like we were being hunted. I moved out by the end of the week. Police followed up, but they didn't find anything. No fingerprints, no suspects. Nothing. I still think about that closet sometimes. About how long those screws had been loose. About how close someone had been. And worst of all, how many nights they might have been there, watching me from inside the wall.
You'd think being alone in the woods would be peaceful, until you realize you were never actually alone to begin with. This next story takes that fear to a whole new level.
I used to do delivery work a couple years ago. Nothing special, just food delivery through one of those apps. I lived in northern Indiana, close to South Bend, and I'd usually drive late at night since that's when the payouts were better. Most nights were pretty uneventful, just a lot of driving around half-empty neighborhoods and waiting in parking lots. Sometimes you'd meet weird customers, but it was all minor stuff. I liked the quiet, I liked the routine, but there's one night that still sits in the back of my mind like something I almost imagined. Like it wasn't fully real. Even though I know it was early February. I remember that because it had snowed really hard a few days earlier, and a lot of the side streets still hadn't been cleared properly. I was working the night shift, probably started around 6 and figured I'd go until midnight if the tips were decent. Around 10:45, I got a ping from a customer with a weird username, just a string of letters and numbers. No profile picture. That wasn't uncommon though. People make burner accounts all the time for stuff like this. The order was for a single iced coffee and a muffin from a 24-hour diner a few miles away. Kind of a weird order that late, but whatever. I accepted it. When I arrived at the diner, it was totally empty. Just one old guy behind the counter who barely looked at me. I picked up the order and double-checked the address. It was about 20 minutes away, way out past the main roads, closer to the edge of a nature preserve. That wasn't ideal, especially with the snow, but the tip was solid, so I headed out. I remember thinking how dark it was out there. No streetlights, barely any houses, just long, quiet roads with open fields and the occasional cluster of trees. My headlights felt like the only thing holding back total blackness. The GPS finally led me to this narrow one-lane gravel road, the kind that doesn't look like it goes anywhere, just a tunnel of branches and snowbanks. I hesitated for a second but kept going. The pin was only half a mile up. As I drove, I noticed something strange. There were no tire tracks, just untouched snow and gravel. It didn't look like anyone had been down this road in days. Eventually, I came to a clearing with a single house sitting in the middle of it. 2 stories, all dark, no porch light, no lights inside. Just this cold, silent house in the middle of nowhere. I pulled up and turned off the engine. Immediately, it felt wrong, like I shouldn't be there. The kind of gut instinct that you don't really understand, but you trust anyway. I checked the app. No special delivery instructions, no leave at door or anything. I got out of the car, order in hand, and walked to the porch. The wood creaked under my boots, loud in the silence. I knocked once, nothing, knocked again. Still nothing. I was about to just leave the food on the step and bounce when I heard something upstairs, a faint shuffle, then the sound of a door creaking open. I froze. After a second, a light flicked on in one of the upper windows. Just barely, like a lamp turning on in a distant room. I waited, expecting someone to come down. No one did. Instead, I got a message through the app. No name, just a chat bubble. Can you bring it upstairs? I just stared at the screen. The message didn't make sense. The app doesn't allow customers to chat with drivers unless a driver messages first, and I hadn't. Then a second message popped up. Come around the side. Stairs are in back. My hands went cold. I looked up at the house. The light upstairs was still on, no movement, no sounds. I didn't reply. I just backed off the porch and got in my car. I sat there for a second thinking maybe this was some kind of prank or setup, but as I put the car in reverse, my headlights hit something in the trees. A person, standing behind the house, barely visible between the branches, not moving, just watching. I couldn't make out a face, just a tall figure in dark clothes, completely still, like they'd been standing there the whole time, waiting. I didn't wait to see what they'd do. I hit the gas and backed down that gravel road so fast I almost skidded into a ditch. I didn't stop until I hit the main road again, heart pounding, mouth dry. When I finally pulled into a gas station, I checked the app. The order was canceled. No record of it, no username, no chat history, like it had never existed. I reported it to the app support line. They said no such order had ever gone through under my account. No timestamp. Nothing. I checked my delivery history. It jumped from 10:30 to 11:15 with no orders in between. I even went back to the diner a few days later and asked the guy behind the counter if he remembered me picking up that iced coffee. He looked confused and said they hadn't had any delivery orders that night after 9. I still don't know what the hell happened. I know where I went. I remember every second of that drive. I remember the way the air felt when I stepped onto that porch, the crunch of snow, the glow of that upstairs light. But the app says it never happened. And I don't deliver at night anymore because I can't stop thinking about that person in the trees, just watching, waiting, like they had expected me to come inside, like they were disappointed I didn't.